Hi everybody and welcome to today's event where we have the pleasure to present ExpreS2ion Biotechnology. To help us through this presentation, we are joined by CEO Ben Fransen and CFO Keith Alexander. Of course, today's topic, the fresh from the press, the Q3 announcement. If I should go through the main headlines, it looks like less revenue and bigger operating loss, but well communicated that you are really progressing with your breast cancer candidate. A little bit delay on the COVID-19 phase 3 data expected readout, but also very strong phase 2 data could establish the COVID-19. But I'm sure you will go through this in more details than me, but just to have the headlines. As always, there's a box down below where you can ask questions. Do it through the presentation. We will take the questions in the end. That gives the best presentation. But for now, Ben, I will hand the word over to you.
Thank you very much, Michael, and thank you to HC Andersen Capital for hosting this webinar where I, Ben Fransen, the CEO of ExpreS2ion Biotech, and Keith Alexander, our CFO, will go through the company in connection with the Q3 report that we have released today. Before going through an introduction to ExpreS2ion and our business, the usual disclaimer, which I'll let you read in details when we publish this presentation after the webinar. We are a biotech company residing in Denmark, public listed in Nasdaq First North Growth Market in Stockholm, and we have a rich pipeline of assets addressing infectious diseases and oncology. And we have a very strong IP position to back up our pipeline efforts. We have vaccine development technologies that are now validated clinically in phase 2 setting and now in phase 3 as we speak. We are addressing a global vaccine market, which is an extremely high growth market, obviously driven by the COVID-19 pandemic in recent years, but it's a sweet spot to be in as a vaccine developer. And furthermore, we have important catalyst for our market value potential here in the near future. We have just, together with our licensee, Bavarian Nordic, announced the phase 3 initiation of the COVID-19 vaccine, and it's progressing along. Before moving into our business, this is our management team. I just want to highlight who we are. We are 30 people working out of our lab and office facilities in Hørsholm, north of Copenhagen, headed by me and Keith, our CFO, and we have Max, Mette, and Mathies in charge of our R&D and technology, preclinical development, and medical affairs. Furthermore, now we have a 4-member board since Allan Rosetsky, he resigned last month, but still headed by Dr. Martin Jensen. I just want to highlight that we still have more than 200 years of professional skills and experience in the team here, all combined. New, we have a scientific advisory board set up, which is extremely good for our oncology program. This is a board that is set up with 6 different key opinion leaders. These are highly skilled professional clinicians in the oncology community, in particularly when it comes to breast cancer. So here you see Dr. Giuseppe Cugliani, Daniel Lenehan, Dr. Javier Cortes, Dr. Ulrik Lassen, Dr. Michael Anderson, and Dr. Robert Barch. These are very important people when we are planning our clinical development plan for the ES2B C001, our HER2 VLP breast cancer vaccine project. So that's super good, and we're very pleased that these very well-known scientists in the community actually endorse our plans going forward. This is the pipeline as we depicted today. We have had great advances here in 2022 and also here in the recent quarter. It's still led by the coronavirus vaccine, the ABNCoV2 vaccine asset, which has been outlicensed to Bavarian Nordic and which started the phase 3 trial here in Q3 and is progressing. We then have the breast cancer vaccine project, which we call ES2B C001, which is a HER2 targeted vaccine where we have made tremendous progression here in 2022 in the preclinical stage. Furthermore, we have activities in influenza and malaria, which in light of the time, I will not have that much time to review. But I'll go through the COVID-19 vaccine and the breast cancer vaccine in details. On the breast cancer side, we are addressing obviously a very critical cancer type. 1 in 8 women will experience breast cancer in their lifetime, and more than 600,000 women die every year from breast cancer. And about a quarter of these experience overexpression of the HER2 receptor, which is the target for treatments today and also for our vaccine approach. The breast cancer vaccine market is very much dominated by monoclonal, which have a market value in around $11 billion. These target the HER2 receptor on tumor cells to reduce proliferation and induce tumor destruction. Known brands here are Herceptin and Perjeta, but these products also come with drawbacks. There's the development of resistance, which is known to happen in 20 to 30% of patients. There's a potential for heart-related side effects, and then there's an administration form which is very expensive and needs frequent visits to the hospital. So what we aim at with our HER2 targeted vaccine approach is to overcome these drawbacks through an internal polyclonal antibody production. We use technologies which are the ExpreS platform, which is the foundation of the ExpreS2ion Biotechnologies company. This is based on a proprietary insect cell-based protein production system whereby we can produce the antigens. In the case of the ES2B-C001, it's a HER2 antigen that we make in the S2 cells. Furthermore, we have a virus-like particle technology, which we have in-licensed from AdaptVac, which is a company that ExpreS2ion owns 34% of. So with this VLP technology or virus-like particle technology, you can attach any protein of interest on the surface of a virus-like particle and thereby create a highly immunogenic construct. So this is, by the way, also the technology, the completely similar technology platform that we use in the COVID-19 vaccine. This is great news. In this quarter, we have just announced that a scientific article has been published, and this describes the preclinical proof of concept data that we have highlighted during the last year. We've made some very nice data in collaboration with University of Bologna. I have told on previous investor relations calls about these proof of concept data, which we announced in December last year, in January, and again in May here in 2022. And already now, here in the end of October, there's a scientific paper describing all these data, which is great, actually. So now we can refer to this scientific paper, which has been peer reviewed, and it describes these excellent proof of concept data. We are progressing on the ES2B-C001 as planned. We want to start the clinical testing in 2024, and before that we have to scale up manufacturing and conduct the preclinical safety that are necessary to move into main. We have put tick marks here on the most important steps, the GMP manufacturing. We are outsourcing to manufacturers who make the antigen and the VLP respectively, and the processes have been transferred, and at the moment we are making the proper good manufacturing batches that are needed for the tox study and the study in main later on. On the preclinical safety, we also outsource the research here, and we had a meeting this year in January with the Danish medical authorities that advised us to conduct safety in 2 different species. This we are doing, and we have finalized the first safety study in rodents, and are expecting a report here in the very beginning of 2023. Furthermore, the GLP study, which is the tox study that will enable us to file the clinical trial application will be conducted in non-human primates in 2023, and we expect readout from that in the middle of next year. And then the aim, of course, is to file the clinical trial application before the end of 2023, so we can move into the first clinical trial in 2024. On the COVID-19 vaccine side, we are reliant on Bavarian Nordic. They have the exclusive license to bring this very exciting COVID-19 vaccine to the market. It's called ABNCoV2. Bavarian Nordic have sponsored a phase 2 trial, which they have announced results from. And very recently, actually exactly 1 month ago, they announced some further new data coming out of the phase 2 trial, where they documented that there is a 6 months protection in the people who have been involved in this phase 2 trial. This is very, very good because it indicates that there will also be long-term protection of this vaccine, as we have hypothesized all along. Furthermore, they started the phase 3 study in September and in the middle of enrolling up to 4,000 test subjects, both in the US and Europe. And I know at the moment in Denmark, actually, where I want to enroll myself actually in this study. I can tell you more about that later. But this is going along as planned. Bavarian Nordic have just announced 1 week ago in connection with their Q3 financial report release that they expect headline results in early 2023. So we're looking very much forward to that. And then they will embark on the rolling submission in 2023 and move on towards launch. And hopefully this will bring some cash flow into ExpreS2ion. And this will be through our 34% company AdaptVac, because the license that Bavarian Nordic has is between Bavarian Nordic and AdaptVac, which ExpreS2ion owns 34% of. And there's some substantial milestone payments and royalties that can be expected from this product, and that will be funneled into ExpreS2ion as well. That was a quick introduction to ExpreS2ion Biotech and our most important assets in the pipeline. I'll hand over the mic to Keith.
Thank you, Bent, and thank you, Michael. During the third quarter of 2022, we continue to focus the majority of our efforts on the preclinical development and CMC manufacturing of our breast cancer vaccine candidate. I'll walk through the impact this had on our financials. Starting with this slide, which is on operating income, we experienced a 65% decline year over year in the third quarter to approximately 900,000 Swedish krona, and a decline of 53% on a year-to-date basis to 4.6 million krona. Looking at the trend shown in the chart to the left, you can see that operating income in the quarter was the lowest of the last 11 quarters. In the middle chart, we focus on net sales, which reflects revenue from projects, licenses, and our web shop. They were below the long-term average, and year-to-date they decreased by 67% compared with the same period in 2021. This is, as expected, due to our increased focus on developing the pipeline. In the chart to the right, we show other operating income, essentially grant-related income, which remained at low levels compared to 2020 when we benefited from the COVID-19 related grant. On the next slide, moving to the cost side, which is, of course, a much more significant portion of our income statement than the income side at this point. Operating costs in Q3 amounted to 33.6 million SEK, an increase of 170% compared with the third quarter of 2021. The increase is primarily driven by external R&D costs, for which we've shown the progression over the last 7 quarters in the chart to the right. These costs increased primarily due to CMC costs for the breast cancer vaccine candidate, as we develop the appropriate analytical methods with our CMC partner and acquire the needed materials. Ben mentioned the significant progress we have made in these areas in his comments. On a year-to-date basis, operating costs increased 91% to 79.1 million SEK. Aside from R&D costs, the other main driver of increased operating costs is higher personnel costs due to higher headcount and non-cash incentive compensation charges, which are of course reversed in the cash flow statement. Moving to the next slide. After financial expenses and taxes, we had a net loss of 30.7 million SEK in the third quarter, which was an increase of 227%. The year-to-date net loss increased 137% to 70.7 million SEK. On the next slide, we show how our cash balance has developed year-to-date. In the first 3 quarters of 2022, our cash balance increased by 62 million SEK due to fundraising activities, net of transaction costs. These include the rights issue completed in the second quarter and the TO2 warrant subscription completed in the third quarter. Cash was reduced by 60 million SEK as a result of operating and investment activities. Finally, we realized a 9 million SEK gain from currency changes year-to-date. Note that the figures are adjusted for storing some of our cash in our SCAD account from late 2021 through nearly the end of the second quarter of 2022. You can read about that in more detail in the 3 previous quarterly reports. On the next slide, we show the trend in our cash balance, which ended the quarter at 150 million Swedish krona. This is the second highest level the company has experienced at the quarter end. On our final financial slide, which is the next slide, I'd like to note that the number of investors in ExpreS2ion Biotech Holding AB at the end of the quarter was approximately 13,000 based on Euroclear data, holding 37.6 million shares. We also note that several investors have decided to participate in the phase 3 clinical trial of ABNCoV2. As always, we'd like to thank all of our investors for their continued support and interest in ExpreS2ion. During the last 9 months, the ExpreS2ion team has accomplished a great deal and is working diligently on delivering significant milestones in the coming months and years. With that, I'll pass it back to Ben to discuss those milestones further.
Thank you, Keith. And this is the last slide where I'll just go through our key catalysts here in the near-term future. On the coronavirus project, the ABNCoV2 product opportunity, we are, as mentioned, of course, reliant on Bavarian Nordic progressing further. It's super nice that they are in phase 3 now and they are progressing now as planned. 2023 will be very important for this asset. They expect an initial readout in early 2023, and then Bavarian Nordic expect to initiate a rolling submission throughout 2023. And launch can be expected towards the end of 2023 or 2024. On the breast cancer asset, this is what we call ES2B-C001. We are in the middle of the GMP manufacturing scale-up, and we have initiated the preclinical safety studies where the readout can be expected in the middle of 2023. And importantly, here we expect to file the clinical trial application before the end of next year. The aim is to start the first human clinical study in 2024. And as soon as we have clinical data, we expect also an out-licensing window to open for this important asset. On influenza and malaria, which I had not had time to cover that much, we are progressing as planned. I would say, however, on the influenza project, it's a project which is run in a 16-party consortium funded by the EU, and the initiation of production scale-up or preclinical safety is very much dependent on new grant funding. Hopefully that can be reached in 2023. On the malaria side, the most important asset or the most important assets are the PFS 48-45 transmission blocking vaccine as the RH5 VLP blood stage malaria vaccine. And these are progressing in and towards clinical testing, very much dependent on the progression of University of Oxford, also with respect to further new granting for this academic setup. That's all we had to say here for now. I'll hand the mic back to Michael, and we are ready here for Q&A.
Perfect. You know, I would like to ask, I think we start with Keith. Are there any special costs associated with this quarter's cost level, or is this level going forward? Did you have some ramp-up costs to the breast cancer, or is this a current cost level we maybe also should look for going into 23 and the quarters there?
Sure, Michael. I understand the question, and it's awfully close to asking us to give some guidance into our future results, which we as a policy don't do. However, what I can say I think will be helpful. The costs associated with the preclinical and CMC activities are based on a lot of different sub-activities that are happening, and some of those are quite lumpy in terms of the cost impact. I think we've also made it very clear that preclinical activities and CMC will continue into the middle of next year based on the milestones that we presented. So that's what I can say about that. I hope it helps.
Perfect. Then to Bent, are there any possibilities to get the claims from the data in the phase 2 about durability and protection against variants when the vaccine should be marketed? Are the phase 3 designed also to try and make some of those claims that could make your and Bavarian's vaccine stand out?
Good question, and of course, as mentioned, I'm reliant on Bavarian Nordic in this connection, and I think we are, but I cannot say about the claims here what exactly Bavarian Nordic they want. So they have announced a good long-term data on the phase 2 background, and I'm sure that will continue also going down the road. And this will, of course, also be a key feature in the phase 3 setup as well.
So the phase 3, to your knowledge, and I know you don't have the power over it. To your knowledge, it's also set up so you could kind of measure this also in the phase 3.
I cannot comment on the details in the phase 3.
Yeah. Perfect. Then we jump over to your breast cancer candidate. I know you can talk more about that. Can you already share some preliminary thoughts on clinical trial designs?
I could. I would, however, say it's only last month that we have had a kickoff meeting with the Scientific Advisory Board. This was a very encouraging meeting because they certainly endorsed what we plan to do. But I want to be in full alignment also with respect to after such a meeting that you write down the minutes and that you agree on this is the way we want to do it and so forth, etc., etc. So I think this is a very good question that we should get back to at our next call. And then I'm sure I can provide some more details on this.
Perfect. And then there's a question here, and I again know you need to relate to your that Bavarian is the main partner here. Is there any risk of further delays on the COVID-19? It moves a little bit from late 22 to early 23, and if I understand correctly, it was because they couldn't find the conformity, sourcing that. So is that solved to your knowledge, and is there any, risk to further delays, too little patience or something like that? So if you can share some thoughts on it, I know you can't say very much.
Well, my thoughts when I relate it to our breast cancer vaccine, as it is that you can really never be sure on patient recruitment rates and the whole setup in a clinical trial. That's why it's actually quite you have to be quite cautious in announcing exact dates. So I think who would have known that it's in 2023 that the headline results will come from the phase 3, but apparently getting the first patients in the trial, that also takes some time. I know when it comes to our breast cancer vaccine project, there are patients out there, but I don't dare to comment on the recruitment rate as we speak right now. So relating it into the breast cancer vaccine project, we are starting as soon as possible in 2024.
Perfect. Can you provide some expectation to the current global COVID-19 situation and expected market competition in the coming years? I noticed a small study, and I know it's a small study, and it was thrown away that these RNA vaccines really didn't show any progress even in the newer variants, really still very weak, still weak against new variants where you are actually showing some strength. So is that the way you're thinking that you could be placed, and the view on the markets the coming years?
Absolutely. I'm very happy for that question, because it exactly shows that there is a position for ABNCoV2. It has a broad protection, apparently also against variants of concern, potentially a long-term protection as well. And it's a very stable product. It can be stored at room temperature, handled at room temperature, which is a strong competitive edge as well, especially as this is still a pandemic all over the globe, also in areas where cold chain logistics are extremely expensive and not that available. So this is good for ABNCoV2 and Bavarian Nordic.
And speculating on the market, and now I call it speculating because I know no one knows this, but there will still be a market, even if you hit market in 24. That's still your expectations.
It's certainly COVID-19 is around, and it will be around for many years to come. So I think at the moment we are maybe describing it a little bit like an influenza. It's not as dangerous as it was a year, 2 years ago, although it certainly claims life still, and there will be a market for this for sure also in the years to come.
Perfect. And then there's a question here: when does the clinical for PFS 48-45 transmission, the malaria, starts?
Yes, that's a really good question, and that I wanted to highlight also in my previous description of our milestones here in the near term. I had hoped that University of Oxford could start a phase 1 trial with this malaria in 2022. At least that's what I was told in the beginning of the year. But for various reasons, they cannot initiate the clinical trial right now. But it is in the plan. If you look at the clinical trials register, the study is set up there, but it hasn't formally started yet. So as soon as University of Oxford they can communicate that to me, I can communicate it onwards to our shareholders.
Perfect. Then there's a little bit of a wide question. Would you consider a capital increase prior to starting clinical work on your breast cancer candidate, or are you hoping to find it in the cash flow, the funding of the next phase?
Keith?
Sure. First, I'll say we don't disclose about capital increases and timing on that, but a clinical trial is extremely expensive, so we think about things on a constant basis.
Perfect. Primary endpoint in randomized phase 3 part is Wuhan virus level. How prevalent, or how much of that do we actually have in the Europe? Or so can it actually be proven?
Well, it's still a coronavirus antigen, and the Wuhan strain is the original one. So I don't think it matters. That's what we've seen, that we can also protect against variants of concern. The interesting thing is with our S2 mate antigen, we have a design that covers and actually gives a very broad protection, makes the immune system recognize it as a potential agent and raise the antibodies that we want to, irrespective of whether it's Wuhan or another variant of concern. So that's the important message here.
Perfect. I think we went through all the questions. Thank you to you, Keith and Ben, for taking us through the presentation and answering the question, and thanks to the audience for listening. May everybody have a nice day.
Thank you.
Thank you.